Tec Sounds presents EduTrends.
Hi, I am José Pepe Escamilla, Associate Director of the Institute for the Future of Education. Welcome to EduTrends, presented by the Institute for the Future of Education. This is a Tec Sounds podcast, the official podcast of Tecnológico de Monterrey. Today's guest is Dr. Fanta Aw, Executive Director and CEO of NAFSA, Association of International Educators. Fanta, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here.
Well, I listened to your conference in the meeting of FIMPES in Mexico City last year, and I thought that what you're doing is very interesting, and we will get into that matter. But before that, I would like to ask you a personal question. What inspired you to dedicate your career to international education and leadership?
Yeah. No, thank you for that question. I often say that I'm the product of international education, in that I was very fortunate at a very young age, since the age of 7, to have gone to international schools and then made my way to the United States to do my bachelor's and my master's and my PhD as a former international student. And so I've navigated what it means to be an international student in a different part of the world, learning a new culture, learning a new curriculum, a new sort of educational system, and so forth. So it has very much shaped my worldview and has very much shaped who I am as a professional and on a personal level. So I really became interested in this work because it was my personal experience. It was my journey. And I felt that that was a journey that was important to me. It was transformative on lots of levels. And so when I was given the opportunity to be of service in the field, it was no hesitation on my part to say, here's my way of giving back to a field that has given me a lot in sort of personal and professional ways.
So you're a believer in international education.
I am a big believer in international education. I am proudly a product of international education. I certainly know that we have a lot of work to do, but I do believe that it is one of those experiences that is very unique. And it's not, and I also realize that I'm incredibly privileged to have that experience, because it's not an experience that everyone gets to have, right? We know that we have aspirations to see more students, more scholars, more researchers engaged in this way, but we know that it's still something that is for the few. And part of the work and part of the reason I'm here and doing this work right now is to figure out how to scale this up. How do we make sure that there are more people with those opportunities?
Right. So I am also a product of international education. So I did my studies in Monterrey, Mexico, under my undergraduate degree in computer science. And then I went to France, to Grenoble, to the Polytechnic Institute, to do my master's and PhD in computer science also, and artificial intelligence. So we can talk about that. But I would like to ask you, as the CEO of NAFSA, the Association of International Educators, what are the things that you're currently most focused on?
Yeah. So I would say we're focused on a couple of things, but the most salient and most important ones are really working with universities on how they scale up international education. We know that there's a lot of work taking place on lots of different university campuses, and now one size fits all in terms of what internationalization actually looks like. But we're very interested in figuring out, how do we scale that up? When you see a country that has an increase in young people who are trying to access education, and you see how much, the education pipeline is limited, part of our work is to figure out, how can we scale that up? How can we make sure that international education is not seen as nice to have, but that it's actually integral to the education of this generation of students, and that is integral to this generation of scholars that are working in the field. So part of it is that is the big picture and the most important goal. The second goal is knowing that higher education in lots of places around the world is being questioned in terms of the value of higher education. And that is an issue that we see in most places in the world. Part of the work that we're trying to do is to tell the story of the value of international education and to really bring evidence to that work so that people understand why it matters and why it's not nice to have, that in this world that is local and global at the same time, the ability to prepare the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow actually requires a global intercultural mindset. And that's one of the things that I think is quite important. So it's really this piece of, how do we make the value proposition that international education is needed and that it is not just nice to have. So that's the second part of the work that we do. And then the third part of the work that we do is, as a membership organization with over 11,000 members, we get to see the entire ecosystem of higher education with the number of institutions, small, middle, medium-sized, large, private, public, small liberal arts from all different parts of the world, 150 countries. It gives us the zoom out view of what's happening within education, what are some of the innovations and things that are taking place, and how we can basically be a convening place for people to have the exchange of ideas as they're thinking about innovations and as they're thinking about the work that's taking place across our different borders. So that's one of the roles that we look at and why that matters a lot. So it's about scalability, it's about the value proposition, and it's about sharing the practices that are taking place so institutions can learn from each other, knowing that not one size fits all, and every institution has to determine what works best for them.
But very interesting. We will come back to how everyone can have this experience and shift from nice to have to everyone. But I would like first to ask you why international education is important in higher education. Why should we aim to every student to have an international experience?
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a legitimate question. I would say the reason why it's so important today is because our economies are interconnected, and we do live in a global economy and in a globalized world. And so it is incredibly important how we understand others, how we understand ourselves, how we situate ourselves within sort of the larger sort of world that we're in. And part of the way we do that is really through exchange of people to people. There is really no substitute for people-to-people exchange. And so that's one of the main reasons where international education comes in. It's about intercultural learning. It's about educational exchange. And that's a very, very important part of what happens, given that we're in a very interconnected and a globalized world. Research crosses border. When you think about every major issues that we confront today, as a sort of human species, whether it's climate change, whether it's migration and displacement, you name any major issue, pandemics and so forth, they know no borders, they cross borders. And the only way we can solve those is really in partnership with others. And so part of that is one of the things that international education provides is an opportunity to understand how we work together and how we work across borders and learn across borders and do research across borders.
Yep, it's very interesting there, and I am convinced of what you said. But I was thinking on one of your objectives. Is you say that some people are questioning the value of higher international education, and international education has a value proposition. That is very important. How you've managed to measure somehow in a more tangible way. There's a way of measuring what's the value of higher international education in higher education.
Yeah, no, so I think there are a couple of ways that we can measure that. One is that, for example, in the work that we do, particularly we're very invested in public policy work. So you have to speak to policymakers in ways that resonates for them about why does this matter and why should we care? And there are lots of different ways we go about this, but one simple example, but that's actually quite salient, has to do with the economic value of international education. We know, for example, just in the example of the United States, that with over 1 million students who are studying here in the United States, what they bring to the economy of universities, what they bring to the local economy, what they bring to the national economy of the US is not negligible. We know that at least $43 billion is the kind of investment that international students are making by coming to study here. But that's not enough. What we see is that in addition to what they're contributing to the economy, is once they graduate is really the kind of innovations that they bring into the economy. When you look at, for example, the fact that 1 in 4, $1 billion or more dollar startups were founded by former international students. And when you start to imagine the job creation that creates, the kind of innovation potential that it provides and so forth, that becomes a very important value proposition for how we as society needs to think about it. That's just the United States. But multiply that by other parts of the world where you're having a lot of mobility, and then think about research and research innovations. Just with the pandemic, when we were in crisis as the world and the world came to a standstill, and we needed vaccines. The people who were helpful, among the top 3 vaccines that were out there and that were being dispensed to the world were created by folks who have had an international education. It was created by people who were doing cross-border research and were able to come together to solve what was a major crisis, not in one part of the world, but globally. So there's multiple examples of the ripple effect of international education from an economic perspective, from a sort of societal change perspective, and so from a research and innovation perspective, and from a job creation perspective. These are examples of the benefits of international education beyond, of course, the benefits to individuals. It's the societal benefits that I think are important.
Thank you. A very compelling answer. And now that we are convinced that international education is a must-have, I would like to ask you, in your experience, what are the most effective approaches for the university to foster these international perspectives, but also diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. So I think international education, diversity, equity, and inclusion actually go hand in hand. Because one of the things that we see, universities that are exceptionally good at this work have a very diverse group of students that are coming from all different parts of the world, that are finding themselves on campuses to study, to do research, to collaborate on lots of levels, but also bring in researchers, bring in faculty and other stakeholders in the mix of internationalization. And among the models that we have seen, it has to start with the leadership, has to believe in the value of international education, and there has to be a strategic sort of articulation of why that matters to the institution and how it fits within the mission of the institution. So the first part is, what is the relationship of the mission to international education and internationalization? That you need to be mission-centric about it, but that's not enough. You need to convince faculty. So the more you can engage faculty in this work, including curriculum development, faculty development, the more you can incentivize faculty sort of intercultural and cross-cultural sort of research, that can be helpful. Because what we find is when faculty get engaged, ultimately, the byproduct of that is you will see more student exchanges come as a result of that. So faculty engagement is not negligible in this endeavor. Another piece is that we need to have lots of different models. Not every student will want to leave their parts of the world to come and get a full degree somewhere, but they may be interested in a semester somewhere. They may be interested in an internship in a different parts of the world. They may be interested in coming to do community-based learning and research in a different part of the world. So we have to have different models for how we think about student exchanges. We have to have different models about how we think about faculty collaborative research. And then there's the reality that there'll be some students who will never leave their parts of the world. They too could benefit from an international education by having what we call internationalization at home. And that has to do with the curriculum that is put in place that allows students to get an intercultural, an international dimension in their curriculum. And again, faculty is at the center of that work. So for me, you can't think about diversity and equity and inclusion without thinking about its relationship to international education. Because we have people who have the means, who can easily move around. The same way we have people who have the desire and the ambitions, but don't necessarily have the means. So we have to be able to create opportunities that are in line with our different stakeholders, whether it's a semester, it's a research, it's an internship, it's a collaborative sort of work study program, etc. That becomes quite important.
Thank you for your answer, Fanta. In Tec de Monterrey is very important. Also, this internationalization part is, as you say, is part of our mission. Our leadership is convinced, etc. We have a lot of students that go into exchange programs, different types of exchange programs. If I remember well, more than 6,000 students go abroad every year for a full semester or a summer session. We receive around maybe 4,500 students, international students, in our campus. Nevertheless, we should be sending around 12,000, no? So every year, so that everyone has this experience, no? Abroad. But as you said, not everyone is able to go for different reasons. Some reasons can be personal, financial, lack of opportunities, because also we have to create these spaces for the students to be in other places. And you talk about internationalization, international education at home. I would like you, if you can explain what are the tools, the toolkit of international education at home, because I think that many of our listeners will be interested on developing these skills in the students, but maybe they don't have the possibility of sending all the students abroad.
No, so thank you for that question. So really the notion of internationalization at home is this idea that not every student is going to be able to go overseas, but you can still create an international education opportunity for them at home. And a lot of that has to do with the curriculum. What is it that you're including in your curriculum that gives them a broad-based view and perspective? And knowledge base is an example of that. Another example of internationalization at home is virtual exchanges. Virtual exchanges are growing in size and in innovation. So that's another way that would allow, for example, a faculty member may design a course and have students who are in that class, but that faculty member may be in partnership with another faculty member in another country and their students. And then there's an opportunity for that kind of learning, co-creation that's across border. And you're using now technology as sort of in many ways an enabler to do that. So virtual exchanges is an opportunity to do that. But another example of internationalization at home is going back to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In many parts of the world, Mexico is a perfect example of that. You have such diversity of cultures within Mexico, diversities of traditions within Mexico, diversity around history. And when you think about just sort of, in terms of geography in Mexico, et cetera, the ability to create opportunities for students to learn about cross-cultural, intercultural, sort of opportunities for students, even within Mexico, looking at the rich diversity and history that you have, could be examples of how internationalization at home takes place and happens as well.
Yeah, very interesting approaches, and I think that opens our minds to think differently about international education. Is not only going to another place, that would be, I think, a very good experience, or at least had that experience, but also how to create these opportunities for the students to develop these international global vision skills in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing too that often we forget is, Monterrey is a perfect example. You have an incredible number of international students on your campuses, in addition to students who go overseas. The question becomes, how do you best leverage that, right? How do you best leverage your international students who are on your campuses, and what are the cross-cultural programming and opportunities that it affords? And for the students who've gone abroad, when they come back from a study abroad, how do they get reintegrated, and how can they become in many ways ambassadors in sharing their knowledge, their experiences, and so forth? So even making sure that for the students who are on the campuses, how to best leverage that. And I know Monterrey does a lot of really important and good work in this space, but there's many other institutions who could do much more work in this space as well. So it's really leveraging that. And then for your faculty, you have international faculties on your campuses. You have a lot of research that you're doing with collaborators elsewhere. Again, you're doing that already with the conference that you do every year in January by bringing in, right, the world to Monterrey for the kind of engagement and learning and exchange that's happening. That's part of the ecosystem of international education, to have this kind of transference of knowledge that's taking place across borders, and when you've been an important convener for those kinds of exchanges and discussions and learning that takes place.
You're right that we often forget that the international education includes also the students and the international students and professors and visitors that we have in the campus. So remembers just an experience that happened last week. I was asked by a group of students in one of the hallways here in the campus they said if I had lived in a foreign country, and I said, yes. Can I do an interview to you? Yes. It was in Spanish, and he said the interview will be in English. There was a group of 5 students that asked me about my experience as a foreign students in France, in Grenoble. And after that, I asked them where they were from. And there were 5 students, 3 from Mexico, 1 from Finland, and the other, I think, was from Germany. So they were all speaking English between them and asking these questions as part, I imagine, of a course that is related to international skills. So that brings me to the missed opportunities that we can have in our campus when we have international students or international professors, but we don't design activities that enable other students to take advantage of the presence of them to develop these internationalization skills.
Absolutely. And there's so many ways it happens. When I was in a university setting before coming to NAFSA, I remember doing a lot of these programs, including like language learning program, right? Where we would have, opportunities that if you had your students from France who were on your campuses and you have students who wanted to learn French, you would have language, you would have these language coffee hours where your French students could come and sit down with students from maybe Finland, students from maybe Japan, and students from Mexico, and students from Colombia. And what they would do is spend an hour or two, and they would be solely speaking in French, so that those students could not only learn the language from sort of book learning, but actually have someone for whom this is a first language and actually sit down, because as you and I very well know, with language, you have to be immersed in it. And so there are lots of opportunities like that can happen. And I think on our campuses, some of them are what I call low-hanging fruits. We have to create the structure around them. Others are going to be definitely much more involved when it comes to curriculum and everything like that. So that's just, to me, I think, an example of it. And you haven't studied in France. I'm sure if, someone put up, okay, we were going to have a French club and we want people who speak French, let's all come together and even just read, a French newspaper and kind of have a conversation about that. So there's lots of opportunities like that for engagement that's taking place. And we have many, many examples like this that can happen on our campuses. Some are small, but they're significant, and others are major, sort of what I would call structural changes that are needed to make international education more accessible and scalable.
Thank you, Fanta, for the examples and the answer. I would like to go to a different place now. Right now, we are in a moment that many things are changing. Global trends. People are asking themselves if, this free trade, open borders. There are some stuff happening in technologies also, with the disruption of technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, that are also people say maybe we'll not need to learn another language because technology will translate everything. So what's the need to learn another language? And then there is also geopolitical issues. We have seen in the last years a tendency in many countries that in the elections, people are voting for more like nationalistic views, so protecting the borders, maybe consuming local, I don't know. So many of these things, I think, in the context of internationalization, international education, etc., have some impact or some influence in them. So how do you think that educational institutions, like higher education institutions, could react to this kind of trends and things that are happening in the world?
No, thank you. The issues of geopolitics, the issues of sort of, nationalistic tendencies that we're seeing and the rise of that certainly are real. And one of the things that I think it really behooves all of us is that we are being challenged, particularly as higher education, to really show our value to society. I think there's so many people who feel left behind in terms of feeling like, you know what, I'm not sure that an investment of my time, my learning is going to result in a better life, or the kind of social mobility that education is often there to promulgate, et cetera, and so forth. So I think the skepticism that has established is one that we really do need to take seriously and pay a lot of attention to, because the other part about this that's important is that when education is done and is done well, it's really important that people be knowledgeable and that facts actually matter. And we live now in a society where people are bombarded by so much misinformation and disinformation, and education has a real important role to play in democracies and have a real important role to play in social mobility. So what I see is that we are being challenged right now to show the value of the work that we're doing and how that can actually lead to better lives for people. Part of that requires that we move from the margins of things to the center of it. So let's give an example. Much of the big institutions that are doing important work happen to be in major cities. Our rural areas need a lot of attention in lots of parts of the world, and they've been left behind. We have to be thinking about educational modalities that are affordable, certainly in the case of the United States, and that are accessible. And we have to figure out where technology can be an enabler in helping with that. we have to be able to think about, what are modalities for not only learning, but, not everybody is going to come and be able to go be in college for 3 or 4 years to earn a degree. And it's perfectly fine that you have among our people who are plumbers, people who are electricians and all of that. And so our ability to be able to help with job creation is one of the things that I think we're seeing a lot of backlash. This idea that, our economies are under threat, our jobs are under threat, our ways of life are under threat. But here's the problem. The world as we know it today cannot afford to retreat back to what it was centuries ago. Our borders are more porous than they've ever been. Our economies are more intertwined than they've ever been. So when you make a decision about you make an economic decision as a nation state, not understanding how your economy is literally tied to other economies, it's going to have consequences on lots of levels. So the train has left the station and there is no going back. Now, let's be clear. In knowing that there's no going back, we're seeing the kind of backlash that you're seeing in many parts of the world. And part of our work is to be able to help people understand that it's not an either or, there's not a we and a them, but that there can't be a we without them, right? So just a perfect example for me is when I think about the trade tariff issues. The U.S. cannot grow its economy without being in healthy trade relations with its neighbors, and in this case, specifically Mexico or Canada and others. Vice versa, our economies are intertwined. And so this idea that we can just go back and retreat in whatever part of the world we're in, yes, there's a desire to go back to ways things were supposedly, but the world has changed. And with technology, I think all too often we keep talking about, oh my goodness, AI is here. And instead of seeing AI as a threat, we have to figure out how we work with AI. We have to figure out what are the sort of the tangible benefits that AI brings, but then also what are the tangible things that make us fully human. And it's not an either or, but I think there's this notion of a zero-sum game, that there's going to be some winners and some losers. And my philosophy has always been an abundance mindset. I cannot win without you winning.
Thank you very much for your answer. But I agree with you that we need each other and we need to work together. And I expect, as you said, if I understood what you said, that this is a process that is inevitable. Now the countries will be more closer to each other. Maybe there's a reaction to that, but in the long term, we'll continue integrating and being more open about what we do. No? So we need each other. We need this global world, as you explained before, not only for commerce, but also for culture, for inclusion, for many things. It makes humanity stronger, not to be together. Yes. So what I have a last question is for long-term forecasts, maybe. I don't know how long-term is in higher education, maybe 5 years, 10 years. You can choose the window, how far we can see for the future of international education. So what's that future, and what should be doing higher education institutions right now to prepare for the opportunities and challenges of that future?
No, I think as higher education, we talk about a lot of the headwinds that we have and the challenges, but I always say with challenges come opportunities. And I see within the next 5 years or so, tremendous opportunities if we're willing to stretch ourselves and in many ways have the courage to do so. So among the things that I see is we're going to continue to see disruptions to how learning takes place and how we think about learning. Technology, I think, is going to be that sort of engine that's going to force us to think about that and how learning takes place. We have a generation of students that are coming into our educational systems. They're going to challenge our pedagogical approaches to how we teach in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So I think our ability to have our faculty retooled and upscaled and reskilled to how you teach to a different generation and to a different time, I think is going to be important. I think the importance of transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary education is going to be prevalent because no one discipline, I think, has the corner on knowledge and can solve those issues that are challenges that we confront. So I do see much more of an interdisciplinary approach to education as we've seen it. I do think we're going to start seeing some very interesting models of partnerships that will emerge. The role of industry, academia is going to become very, very pronounced. Our ability to answer this question of how it is that people are having an education, but they're getting out there and unemployment is so high is one of the big challenges that we're going to have to confront. And that's going to require policymakers getting engaged with this, but it's going to also require deeper involvement of academia and industry as we know it. Some institutions are already down that road. Others are just beginning that journey. So those are some of the things that I change. The nature of learning is going to change. The nature of teaching is going to be changing. How we think about curriculum and interdisciplinary work, who we partner with as institutions is going to continue to evolve. Those are some of the things that I see down the road as we move forward.
Wow, we're very, very interesting answer. And that give us a lot of space for reflection. And I want to thank you, Fanta, for your time, for your insights and generosity, and talking about international education and the future of global education, what the situation is right now. I enjoy a lot our conversations, and I hope to see you very soon here in Mexico and or elsewhere. And I'm sure that our discussion will be of value for our audience.
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to have this exchange with you today, but also just for me to say really thank you for the work that you all are doing, because the work that you're doing with the center and the work that's happening with with your institutions, I think are really models for all of us to want to aspire to. So thank you for your contributions to the field and the work that's happening.
Thanks a lot, Fanta, once again. Congratulations also for your work.
Thank you.
For more information, visit observatory.tech.mx/EduTrends podcast and ife.tech.mx. A special thanks to Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Institute for the Future of Education, and the Tec Sounds team. EduTrends producers Esteban Venegas and Christian Igosa. Stay tuned and play Tec Sounds in your favorite podcast app for other great shows and content.